Gabbie, Schei,
Emily Kruger,
Welch,
Giordano.
481 billion. Just this year, people will spend an estimated $481 billion on clothing and accessories, according to Aaron Orndorff, who was on Forbes' top 10 list of back-to-back content marketers for an article titled The E-Commerce Industry of Fashion, published March 12, 2018.
Whether you're aware of it or not, clothing plays an important role in each of our lives. As you can see, we're all wearing clothes today.
Thank heavens!
As an American society, we purchase clothes religiously in order to keep up with the latest fashion trends.
The history of the fashion industry has affected the economy and culture of America today. Today, we'll be teaching about 4 different eras of women's fashion and how style has evolved. First, we'll discuss the background of each era, second, clothing, then hairstyles, and finally, makeup. The 4 time periods we'll enlighten you on are
the 1920s,
the 1950s,
the 1980s,
and the 2000s. Now that we've introduced our speech, we will now give you some insight to the fashion of the 1920s.
The 1920s was a very jovial time. The number of people migrating to cities went up exponentially, and between 1920 and 1929, the total wealth of the U.S. doubled, according to the Editors of History, an informational program that has been running since 1995, in an article titled The Roaring Twenties History, published February 26, 2013. The economy was booming, people were ecstatic, and we had just won World War I. This was all apparent in the fashion of the time, as skirts rose above the knee, dresses were adorned with sequins and feathers, hairstyles became shorter, and the bedazzled flapper we associate with Daisy Buchanan became popularized. Women's fashion is not completely accurate with what is depicted in popular movies, though. In this topic, the 1920s, we will be sharing with you some information regarding the clothing, hairstyles, and makeup trends of the time period.
Now, the clothing in the 1920s was more diverse than previous eras, but more simpler than today's fashion. Typically, women wore straight-fit dresses that went below the knee, or dresses with a slight flare at the hip with Mary Jane heels, and they rarely left home without a hat. During this time period, brightly colored stockings and scarves were prominent as well.
Women's clothing became less constricting, and earlier clothing items like corsets were left behind. Bright colors that didn't match also became a trend at this time. Many clothing items like scarves were haphazardly thrown on, and overall fashion in this era was all about freedom, so mismatched colors and loose garments were very popular. Celebrity icons like Zelda Fitzgerald and Josephine Baker donned the bold colors, scarves, and hats, making every girl want to wear them. This included hairstyles, our next subtopic. In the 1920s, women were gaining more freedom, and our fight for equality inspired many women to chop off their long locks in favor of a more progressive look called the bob, a short hairstyle typically at or above the shoulders. The French bob was also popular for girls with natural waves.
For women who felt extremely rebellious, there was the Eton crop, which was popularized by Josephine Baker, according to an article published February 26, 2013, titled The History of the Flapper Part 4 Emboldened by the Bob, published on the Smithsonian Museum website and written by Emily Spivak, a writer for the New York Times style column. The Eton crop was a short hairstyle that was typically curled at the ends and didn't reach any longer than the earlobes. Another iconic look from this time period were Marcel or finger waves. These waves were inverted curls that were chopped off at bob length. Overall, women in this decade abandoned old-school femininity and fashion in favor of a more freeing appearance and feel. This includes the next part of the 1920s, cosmetics.
Makeup, along with bobbed hair, also became more apparent at this time. It lost the old taboo it used to have, and many department stores had a try-before-you-buy type setup. Icons like Clara Bow and Coco Chanel really influenced the makeup world. The Cupid's bow lip became popularized by Miss Bow. This emphasized the little dip that we have in our top lips.
The 1920s was all about a youthful, rebellious look, so bright red lips with dark eyeshadows were very prominent. Women wanted ivory pale skin, so powders and foundations were found everywhere. This stark contrast between cream skin tones and bright lips and dark eyeshadows really fueled this era.
Of course, why have dark eyeshadow without caked-on mascara and eyeliner? Women in this time period typically ran an eyeliner brush over their eye in a winged fashion and blended it into the eyeshadow above. Another iconic look from this time period were rounded brows. Women would pluck and color their eyebrows in a round, thin shape. The clothing, hairstyles, and makeup trends of the 1920s really depicted what women felt. Freedom and rebelliousness thrived. There were less constraints, and it was party time.
Now that we've talked about the 1920s, let's talk about the 1950s. Rock and roll was emerging, and television sets were becoming more popular within American homes. And because so much time was spent watching TV, it started to influence how Americans saw themselves and the world around them. It affected the American culture in the way that people listened to music, what they ate, and especially what they wore. In the 1950s, women's fashion had exploded into new directions, new colors, and new silhouettes.
During the early 50s, a French designer, Christian Dior, turned the fashion industry upside down with his new look. This new look was big and bold and entirely feminine. Dress skirts were full and busts were padded in order to emphasize a small waist. Stiff petticoats were worn under skirts and dresses in order to add more volume. Wide belts were worn to flatter the feminine shape. Accessories and jewelry were worn to match and complement dresses, prints, and styles.
In the 1950s, many women were encouraged to fulfill their role as a wife, mother, and homemaker, and be as beautiful as she could be while doing so. Her appearance was a direct link to her husband's success. This caused a boom in the clothing industry as many women spent more time shopping for the latest fashions.
So what were the latest fashions in the 1950s? Some trends included swing dresses, pencil skirts, poodle skirts for teens, and Peter Pan colored dresses. But according to Donna Cosmato on WomenLoveToKnow.com, there were two main types of dresses. One of them was more fitted in the hips and fell into a wide skirt below the waist.
The other sort of dress featured a pencil skirt and was much more form-fitting. It skimmed the body all the way to the knees, and even the slit at the back didn't allow women to have a long stride, so they tended to wiggle when they walked. So sometimes this dress was called a wiggle dress.
Before the 50s, women often wore suits to work, so these fashion changes extended to these work suits as well. Skirts were more fitted to the body, and sleeves were shorter in order to show off accessories and gloves. And women were expected to wear more simple, monochromatic colors.
Jeans also became more of a general fashion for casual wear in the 1950s. Levi's jeans got a whole new look when Marilyn Monroe popularized them in films that gave a whole new appeal to women. According to Sarah Idacavage on Fashionista.com, in an article published on March 3, 2017, jeans on a female body were a symbol of power, rebellion, and strength. Women were experimenting with new hairstyles. 1950s hairstyles were shorter, looser, and less work to keep up with. These short hairstyles allowed women to have a home beauty routine. Some of these short hairstyles included the curly bob, the bouffant, a crazy hair like this, and short bangs.
Many women also started accessorizing more at this time. Headscarves, headbands, and bandanas became extremely popular. Some women favored thinner ones that they could tie into a bow atop their heads. Other women preferred larger chiffon scarves that they could wear to the beach to protect their hair from the wind. Flowers rose among the ranks of young women, and many girls were often found wearing flower crowns or wreaths of flowers on top of their heads.
Along with new hairstyles, new makeup trends were popular as well. Women had more options with both powders and foundations on the market. For cheeks, women usually went with a rose-colored blush over the cheekbone.
Many women also wore minimal shimmery pastel-colored eyeshadow and eyeliner to outline the eye to give it an almond shape. Sometimes false eyelashes were worn to emphasize the look. Depending on the time of the decade, the lips were different. Red became the desired color in the earlier years, and in the later years, pink was the desired color. The 1950s was all about new looks and femininity with fashion, hair, and makeup. Now let's talk about the trends of the 1980s.
The 1980s was a time of extreme growth and change. Technologies were really developing. Clothes began to be made in offshore countries with cheaper labor. More and more people had computers in their homes, and the World Wide Web was developed. The Western world's ways of women working equal pay began to spread. This therefore led to power dressing for women.
Fashion for women evolved dramatically. From dresses to fabrics to hairstyles, nothing went unchanged. Women began dressing bolder and brighter, and with power in society and more say in society. It didn't come just from what they wore, though. Big hair and flashy makeup added to the fearless look. Now we will explain what these eye-catching fashion choices were and who influenced them.
First off, what did they wear? When many of us think of the 80s, we think of brightly colored leggings and leotards and high-waisted pants. And while these all are very relevant, there's so much more too. Taylor Brewer, a verified fashion expert, states in the article TrendSpotter that there were very different styles for different activities, events, and cultural groups.
A healthy lifestyle was advertised more than ever in the 1980s. Jane Fonda had her own workout videos, and she promoted this new gym attire. Leggings, leotards, and leg warmers were very popular and were accessorized with elastic headbands. The leotards were bright and full of color and stripes and polka dots. Movies also helped popularize this trend. Next, everyday clothing was very eye-catching as well. Most women wore things like high-waisted jeans, oversized sweaters, Converse, shoulder pads,
Not the football ones, boys.
turtlenecks, over-the-knee boots, and many more things. Like nowadays, style was different depending on your culture and community.
The hip-hop community represented Queen Latifah by wearing baggy clothing with athletic detail in bold colors and patterns. Those into punk music often wore leather jackets, ripped jeans, band tees, and brightly colored hair. Women gave a glimpse of their attitude by the clothing that they wore.
When it came to more formal events, high-waisted dress pants, along with a matching jacket like the one I'm wearing, were very popular for older women. Silk blouses accessorized by bracelets and gloves were common as well. When it came to more formal events like prom, poofy dresses that were often sequencing off the shoulder were common for younger women. Even with these more sophisticated events, women did not shy away from bold colors and patterns.
Hairstyles were very iconic during this time. Many women had perms and short bangs, and high ponytails were common as well. Hair was often accessorized with headbands and scrunchies to add a pop of color. Hairspray was often used for full volume curls. The bigger the better was definitely the case when it came to hair.
As we mentioned, makeup followed the trend. Many women wore things like vibrant eyeshadow with matching lipstick. Unlike nowadays, nude or duller tones were not as common. Of course, not everyone followed this trend, but most women were not afraid to show off their style through the makeup that they wore.
There were many icons during this time period, according to Eleanor Block, the assistant editor of Who, What, Where, When, in an article titled 80s Fashion, which was published February 12, 2019. Stars like Princess Diana, Madonna, Cher, Cindy Crawford, Tina Turner, and Cyndi Lauper had very iconic styles, and they may still be seen today.
Like we said before, nothing about style in the 1980s went unchanged. From bold colors to wild hair, women were not afraid to draw attention. Now that we've talked about fashion in the 1980s, we will now talk about fashion in the 2000s.
20 years has passed since the 1980s, and clothing is more different than ever. Technology has evolved a great deal, which in return has impacted our society and our fashion. The Fashion Folks states that the late years of the 20th century and the early years of the 2000s are very much alike in the fact that we are still buzzing about TV shows, pop stars, and technology.
The 2000s were a time where celebrity obsession peaked. Instead of fashion models being trendsetters for fashion, it was celebrities like Paris Hilton who were looked at instead. Television shows like Grey's Anatomy, One Tree Hill, Friends, and Gossip Girl were introduced and would become iconic regarding fashion.
Known as the mashup decade, the popular style of the 2000s incorporated the fusion of many different trends. Designers of this time began incorporating the vintage style of the 1960s, 70s, and 80s.
Crop tops were higher and waists of pants and skirts were low. This was when it was popular to show off your midriff.
Not around Prunty, though.
A typical outfit in the 2000s included things like low-waisted, bootcut jeans, often accessorized by a belt, tracksuits, crop tops, and shoes like Heelys or Crocs.
Hairstyles that were popular in the early 2000s were crimped hair and middle parts. These were very easy and common amongst popular TV show actresses. Overall, the outfits in the 80s were very bold, but the hairstyles were tamer.
Much like the outfits of the time, makeup was wild and vibrant to match whatever style you were wearing. Bright-colored eyeshadow and very dark eyeliner were the most popular trends.
Getting into the 2010s and most current fashion styles, these are considered a lot more socially acceptable. Things like vests, rompers, and blazers, like the romper that I'm wearing now, are more prominent and considered a lot more professional as well. Natural style and a more natural style was brought back as well. This means that the funky patterns and colors were not worn nearly as much anymore.
Fashion Trends by Decade, an article published on April of 2017 by a blogger that goes by @GirlBossFashion, suggests that style changed so much from the 2000s to the 2010s is because as a society we became more lazy, therefore our fashion choices were lazy as well. Popular trends during this time were things like leggings, high-rise skinny jeans, tennis shoes, sweaters, and Birkenstocks.
And name brand clothing was more prominent than ever. Brands like Patagonia, Ivory Ella, Lululemon, and Nike are just a few that are trending today. Although these brands are very expensive, women still buy them to keep up with what is popular.
Accessories are becoming more prominent as the years go on as well, because when fashion trends change, so do accessories. Many are being brought back from earlier decades, including scrunchies from the 1980s and chokers from the early 1900s.
Makeup was much like hair. Neutral looks were very trendy. Simple eyeshadow with a little bit of bronzer is what's seen on most celebrities nowadays. Not too often will you see people walking around with vibrant makeup. This seems to be more socially acceptable.
With all this natural makeup, you would think that women wouldn't spend as much money on makeup products, right? Well, according to People.com, in an article having to do with women and makeup published on March 30th of 2017, it is estimated that $15,000 on beauty products for a woman each year is spent in their lifetime, and this number will only keep rising.
The 2000s and the 2010s were strikingly different than the 1980s. This just shows you that the present style is constantly changing, and it's impossible to know what clothing item will be trending next. Now we're going to show you some casual outfits from these time periods.
This is an example of what a typical woman would wear in the 1920s. Notice the hat and the slightly heeled shoes, and how her jacket and her tights do not match. Her clothing is a bit baggier, she has a bob haircut, and although we can't tell what color lipstick she's wearing because color film wasn't invented until 1935, we can assume that she's wearing a dark red.
This is a typical outfit a woman would wear in the 1950s. Kind of like the dress I'm wearing, she's wearing a polka dot Peter Pan collar dress, and she's accessorized her outfit with a pair of gloves and a hat. Her makeup is very feminine, and she also has a short hairstyle.
This is a common outfit for a younger woman in the 1980s. As you can see, she's wearing high-rise jeans, accessorized by a belt, and an oversized sweatshirt.
Here's a common outfit for a woman in the 2000s. You can see that the jeans are very low rise, and she also is wearing a crop top, and her hair is very straight, and there's not really much time put into her hairstyle.
Now that we've shared the fashion trends from the last 100 years, we will now share why they are important. First off, fashion affects how we spend our money. We are constantly trying to keep up with the newest fashion trends, and this has an effect on our personal bank account as well as on the economy.
Next, knowing all the things that we just shared with you will help you understand how the historical and cultural events during each time period is reflected on by the clothing worn by the women. If we know and understand the evolution of women's fashion, we'll be able to relate it to the events in that time period.
Finally, obviously, it is very interesting to know where fashion originates from. Many trends from the 1900s show up in present style today, so knowing where they come from is very important.
In the end, the history of women's style has impacted so much of our lives, and it will continue to do so, which is why it is important to know about.
Today, we have shared with you the trends from the early 1900s to present day and explained how they've affected us. We've progressed from bobs and flapper dresses to bouffants and collar dresses to perms and leg warmers, finally to messy buns and leggings.
The history of the fashion industry has affected the economy and culture of America today.
It is important to understand the progression of these trends as it affects us financially, and being able to understand the trends and what used to be popular may either save you money or tell you what to buy next.
$481 billion will be spent this year. $481 billion. How much of that will you contribute to?